Hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about the only thing in the news worth talking about today, which is the indictment of Donald Trump. We're going to dive right into it. There's a lot we're going to cover, so we're going to get right into it because unlike most videos where I try and do an overview as to why this is important, I feel like everyone knows the answer, why this is important today. This is unprecedented. In over 200 years, our country has never had a former president be put on trial, charged with a crime, or go to jail. We've never had that happen before. And it is really bad for our country. And this, to me, highlights the problem with the Democratic Party as it exists today. The Democratic Party are very quick to talk about the Republicans and how they're a threat to democracy. They'll say, with Republicans, they want to strip rights away from women, and they want to get rid of voting rights. They repealed the Voting Rights Act, and they're trying to disenfranchise people. January 6th happened. That our democracy was this close. It was so close to being overthrown. That just hysterical nonsense. Every time Republican wins, it's the end of the world. And in order for democracy to survive, there can only be one party. That's what the Democrats say today. They want to destroy all the precedent we have in this country, all the things that made this country work for over 200 years. They want to get rid of the filibuster in the Congress so that they can just ram through any legislation that they want to do. They want to pack the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court doesn't side with them. So the way that we've done it forever, it doesn't really matter. They're just going to pack the Supreme Court because they think that that's how democracy works. Oh, we're in charge now, so let's just overrule the check and balance that we're supposed to have on this branch. Democrats do this constantly. This is just the next in a series of a long list that the Democrats have pushed forward to undermine our democracy while blaming the Republicans. Donald Trump being charged for a crime is a bad thing for democracy. And what Democrats don't realize is that Republicans are going to do this to them. There are people in the Democratic Party, from Hillary Clinton to Joe Biden, who have crimes that are crimes. They are crimes. But they're the kind of crimes that we typically haven't prosecuted people for. The classified documents that Trump had in Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice was going to indict him on this. Don't forget this. Don't mistake this. When they found those documents, Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice, they were going to try and charge Donald Trump with a crime. The only reason they didn't is because then, turns out Joe Biden did it too. If they hadn't found those documents in his Corvette, they were going to charge Donald Trump with a crime. There is no doubt in my mind about it. Hillary Clinton has a problem we're going to get into. Actually, I want to explain the crime against Donald Trump first, and then I'm going to talk about Hillary Clinton. Why did Donald Trump get indicted? What is this crime? Well, let's explain it. Donald Trump allegedly, wink, wink, nod, nod, allegedly had an affair with a porn star named Stormy Daniels. This was years and years ago. Well, when Donald Trump decided to run for president, his personal lawyer, a man named Michael Cohen, a convicted perjurer and liar, paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 to keep quiet. So this is basically sort of a blackmail extortion kind of deal. Stormy Daniels got paid $130,000 because she had sex with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump wanted to keep that quiet during his run for the presidency. Now, the crime that allegedly happened is that Donald Trump then reimbursed Michael Cohen the $130,000. So Michael Cohen pays Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump pays back Michael Cohen $130,000, plus some extra money, which was going to be used to pay for taxes, and so Michael Cohen got the full money back. So Donald Trump pays Michael Cohen back, and in the paperwork that they filled out about this transfer of money, Donald Trump recorded the expenditure as legal fees. Now, technically, that is a crime according to New York state law because it wasn't actually legal fees. You can argue a whole bunch about this, but It wasn't actually legal fees. He was doing something else. He should have done this a different way. But that crime, the quote-unquote crime of legal fees, is a misdemeanor in New York. And a misdemeanor that has a 2-year statute of limitation. Now, if you are savvy enough to realize that since 2016, more than 2 years have passed, you might ask yourself, how could we charge Donald Trump with a crime 7 years in the future? Well, the answer is we can't. But the DA in Manhattan, this man named Alvin Bragg, he is basically doing something that is absurd, it is nonsensical, and I believe it's never going to work if you get the law applied as it's supposed to. If you actually follow the law, this should be thrown out immediately. Alvin Bragg figured out a way to charge Donald Trump with a felony, turn this misdemeanor into a felony. What he's done is say that according to the law in New York, a misdemeanor of forging business records is a felony if you forge the business records to cover up an underlying crime. Well, what is the underlying crime? Well, according to Alvin Bragg, the underlying crime is that Donald Trump was hiding this to violate campaign finance laws, and therefore, because it's a federal campaign finance violation, it is now a felony in the state of New York. This misdemeanor is turned to a felony because it's hiding an underlying crime. Now, this is absolute nonsense. This is absolute nonsense because the previous DA of Manhattan looked at all this evidence and elected not to prosecute Donald Trump because it made no sense. It didn't work. The federal Department of Justice looked into this and decided not to prosecute Donald Trump because it turns out it's actually not the violation that Alvin Bragg is making it out to be. So there is absolutely no precedent to try and elevate a misdemeanor to a felony based on an underlying crime that is not in the jurisdiction of the state that the federal government has declined to prosecute. So there actually is no underlying crime because the federal government decided that it wasn't a crime. Yet Alvin Bragg decided that the federal crime actually is a crime, and even though the federal government didn't prosecute it, he's going to prosecute it for them. This is not the way it works. This is not the way the system works. It's not the way it's designed. It is bad law from what has to be one of the most unimpressive Harvard law grads I've ever seen in my life. Alvin Bragg, when he had his press conference the other day, he sounded like he had no idea what he was doing. How this man got into Harvard law, I have absolutely no idea. It is an indictment of Harvard law is really what it is. So, Alvin Bragg has charged Donald Trump with 34 felonies. And this was trending on Twitter the other day. Everyone was saying, oh my gosh, 34 counts. It is 34 of the same exact count. It is a copy and paste of the same exact thing that I just described. But Donald Trump recorded it in several months in 3 different ways. So for the 12 months of the year that he recorded this on the books, it gets changed to 34 because each month he recorded it both. I'm trying to remember exactly. He recorded it in 3 different ways each month to account for the expenditure. And because the books carried over for a year, that he kept that legal fee on his books, 3 times a month for 12 months got us to, that would be 36. It got us to 34 somehow. But it's a confusing thing, but it's the same charge just applied numerous times. Oh, that makes sense. Because one of the months didn't count the same. That's why. So this whole thing comes down to paperwork that was improperly filed. This is a nonsense crime that Alvin Bragg is prosecuting only because Donald Trump is Donald Trump. This is the law. This is the weaponization of the law that should trouble any person in the country. The fact that Democrats are cheering this is a problem because the law is the only thing that governs this society and keeps us all equal. That is it. The law, as it is equally applied to the people, is the only thing that we have in common at this point as a country. So when people for political purposes, start targeting the law at individuals, every single person in the country should be against this. It doesn't matter if you like Donald Trump. It doesn't matter if you don't like Donald Trump. The fact that Donald Trump is being charged with a crime that literally no other person in the world would be charged with is a problem. I do not like Joe Biden. If Joe Biden was to be charged with this crime following his presidency, imagining this didn't happen to Trump, but this happened in 4 years with Joe Biden, some stupid thing like this, I would be up in arms about this. This is not good for our democracy. It's not good for the democratic republic that is the United States for us to target our political opponents with the weaponization of the law. This is what banana republics do. This is not what America should do. And it doesn't matter if you don't like Donald Trump. This is not a real charge. Alvin Bragg has downgraded 52% of all felonies in New York since he took over to misdemeanors. He has absolutely no interest in charging misdemeanors as felonies, except in the case of Donald Trump. This is ridiculous. This is because Alvin Bragg wants everyone to know his name. But everyone should treat him like a pariah. This man is he is responsible right now more than any other person in the world for undermining democracy in America. And the fact that he's going to hobnob in liberal circles and everyone's going to say, oh, congratulations, Alvin Bragg, you did a great thing. That's a problem. He should be considered a clown. He is a clown. But people on the left should consider him a clown for doing this. This is a bad idea. The idea that Democrats have that Donald Trump is a singular figure and that he's the only one that we can do this to because he's Donald Trump, this is not true. You think Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or Nancy Pelosi, these people who Nancy Pelosi outperforms Warren Buffett in the stock market. Do you think that Nancy Pelosi's wealth is generated because she's a master investor, or do you think it's because she's a fan of insider trading? Do you think we should prosecute politicians for this? Now, I actually am of the opinion that that's fine. If you want to prosecute politicians when they break the law, that's great. We should hold them accountable. But we cannot think that prosecuting people like Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, for a crime like this is a good idea. This is like writing him a jaywalking ticket and then attempting to use some prosecutorial wizardry to elevate that into jail time. That's what they're doing. This is not a real thing. Because the underlying campaign finance violation, by the way, you are allowed to pay as much money personally into your campaign as you want. There is no crime there. So the fact that Donald Trump used $130,000 of his money to pay into what they could consider an in-kind contribution to his campaign is actually not a crime. The only crime would be if he didn't record it properly, which again is not a real crime. The idea that I try and say legal fees to my lawyer to pay hush money to a porn star is a big crime is not. It really is not. I don't care what Alvin Bragg says. I don't care about this crime. Donald Trump shouldn't be having affairs with porn stars. That's not the issue. The issue is, are you allowed to pay money to a porn star to make sure that she keeps quiet? Yes, you are. You are absolutely allowed to do that. That is not against the law. There's no crime that says you can't pay hush money to a porn star. Doesn't exist. Anyway, this is ridiculous. And this is the big problem with the law, the legal system as it stands today. Selective prosecution is a problem. Targeting your political opposition for persecution is not okay. It wasn't okay when it happened under Obama. It's not okay when it's happening now under Joe Biden. You are not allowed to do this. When the Obama IRS targeted conservative 501c3s to shut them down, basically, that is not okay. The weaponization of the federal government against your political opponents is not acceptable by anyone. The fact that it's happening right now is a giant issue. These prosecutors like Alvin Bragg are a really bad problem in society. They have no interest in putting criminals behind bars? None whatsoever. Like I said, downgrading 52% of felonies to misdemeanors is not a good way to solve the crime problem in New York. But this is what they do. This is what these kind of prosecutors do. And I've heard a lot of talk about the fact that George Soros funded Alvin Bragg's election campaign. One of the most idiotic takes on the left is that pointing out the fact that George Soros is a bad guy is somehow anti-Semitic. There is nothing anti-Semitic about pointing out the fact that George Soros has bad politics. George Soros funds a lot of these reform-minded DAs like Alvin Bragg, like that Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. He puts money into politics, and therefore he is a legitimate target of criticism. There's nothing anti-Semitic to say George Soros' politics around criminal justice reform are dumb. It's not anti-Semitic. There are a lot of Jewish people who don't like George Soros. And George Soros, by the way, is about as Jewish as a ham sandwich. He doesn't really practice Judaism. He's not a very religious person. He's ethnically Jewish, but he's not a practicing Jewish person. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying he has bad politics. There are a lot of Jewish people who have great politics. George Soros is not one of them. Nothing anti-Semitic about that. And it's one of the dumber takes I've ever seen, as though the fact that he's Jewish is some sort of shield against criticism, or it should be. It's nonsense. There's nothing. Ron DeSantis was getting a lot of criticism because he pointed out the fact that George Soros funded Alvin Bragg's campaign. And everyone was saying, oh, it's a dog whistle. It's an anti-Semitic dog whistle. No, it's not. It really is not. George Soros puts more money than anyone else into these prosecutor races to elect people like Alvin Bragg, who do a bad job, who do a bad thing and do a bad job at it. Anyway, that's just a digression. That has nothing to do. This indictment will probably help Donald Trump more than it hurts him in the Republican primary. It's not a good thing. Any judge who is fair and impartial should dismiss this immediately. The fact that if it goes to trial, that's because the judge is not doing his job very well, in my opinion. Because there's nothing here. There's nothing here worth prosecuting, and any judge worth his salt should know that. But imagining for a second that Donald Trump does go to trial, there is a chance he is convicted on this just because of where the trial is located. He is not going to find a jury of people among Manhattan who won't convict him of a crime. I think someone said that, if I remember correctly, less than 1% of the people who reside in Alvin Bragg's district voted for Donald Trump. Imagine that. Can you imagine getting a fair and impartial jury in a district that voted 99% blue? That's unheard of. It's crazy. It shouldn't go to trial, but if it does, Donald Trump could actually be convicted of this. This would be the worst thing that happens to our democracy. It's going to help Donald Trump, though, in the Republican primary, and then it's going to hurt him in the general election. That is my prediction. The Republicans have a sort of rally around Trump effect. Whenever Trump gets in trouble, anyone who criticizes him, any problems that come his way, Republicans are quick to rally around him and say, look, he's being unfairly persecuted again. That is true. There is truth to that. The problem is that if this propels Donald Trump through the Republican primary, it is not going to convince the people who need to be convinced to vote Republican to actually vote for him. The people in the middle, the independents, the undecideds, these people are not going to be swayed by the fact that Donald Trump was indicted and possibly convicted of a crime. They're not going to be persuaded to come over and vote for him again. The independent and undecided voters swung for Donald Trump in 2016. It was the thing that made the difference. They swung back in 2020 to Joe Biden. Imagine that we get to 2024. Do we think that this is going to swing those people back to Trump? No, it absolutely is not. Donald Trump, the Republicans have tied their life raft to Donald Trump, and they are sinking because of him. This is not a negative statement about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I thought, for 3 years was a fantastic president. He did a great job being president. Anyone who can look at the first 3 years of Donald Trump's presidency and compare it to Joe Biden's presidency and think that Joe Biden is doing a good job They're just not being honest, or they're just not very bright. It's one or the other. Joe Biden is doing the worst job of president in my entire lifetime. I was born in the 90s. I have lived through, what would that be? We have Bush, Clinton, Bush again. Then we have Obama, Donald Trump, now Joe Biden. I guess 6. I've lived through 6 presidencies. So in the 6 presidents that we've had since I have been born, Joe Biden is by far the worst. By far. Donald Trump was actually one of the better ones. And now we're looking at this, and the Republicans who have tied their raft to Donald Trump, they say, all right, well, look at the first 3 years. He did great, and he was unfairly targeted, and everything is unfair to Donald Trump, and he did a great job. So we should put him up there again. No. You don't understand. Donald Trump is not going to win an election. He just is not going to do it. Because people have made up their mind about Donald Trump. They don't want more Donald Trump. So when he wins the Republican primary, it means to me that the Republicans lose the general election again. And that would be terrible. Donald Trump, if he actually cared about his legacy instead of his ego, which is an impossible thing to imagine, but just try with me, he would say, I did a great job as president, and now I want Ron DeSantis to be president because he is like me, and he's going to continue my great policies, and he's going to do everything that I would do if I was in there, but it's time to bring in this new generation and to make change and blah, blah, blah. He should do that. And when Ron DeSantis wins, he could take credit for a lot of his work. He'd say, look, I did that. I made him. Instead, he turns around, he attacks Ron DeSantis. He's going to sink the hope of the Republican future, and he's going to lose another election for Republicans if he wins the primary, which I think that this propels him to do. It's bad. It's bad news all around. It's bad for democracy that Donald Trump's being put on trial. It's bad because our legal system is in peril. These prosecutors they're derelict in their duty. Alvin Bragg should be impeached. He should be ostracized from polite society, but instead he'll be celebrated for this nonsensical move that is designed to persecute his political opposition. There are problems. There are problems in this country, and I think that this undermines the rule of law. And when Joe Biden is done and the Republicans win, the idea that the Department of Justice isn't going to... Well, first of all, Hunter Biden's going to jail. That's what this does. This just makes it so that it is very clear that the second that the DOJ is controlled by a Republican, Hunter Biden goes to jail. That's going to happen. Donald Trump being indicted was the worst thing that ever happened to Hunter Biden. I'll tell you that. Because Hunter Biden is going to jail the second the Republican takes over. And they're going to say, yeah, remember when you indicted the sitting president on nonsense? Well, what goes around comes around. And the Democrats are going to scream, and they're going to squeal, and they're going to make all sorts of noise. But they have nothing but themselves to blame. All the people who are celebrating, putting the little clapping emojis up on Twitter because they're so happy, Donald Trump's going to jail, Donald Trump's been indicted on a crime. Those people they're the same ones who are going to be all upset when Joe Biden, they launch investigation after investigation into the fact that he is a corrupt old man. And no one but themselves to blame. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. This is going to take a while. I don't think Donald Trump is going to go to jail. He's certainly not going to trial until October, I think is what they said. It's a really long time. So we're not going to have too much information on this. This case should be thrown out, but it won't be. There are a lot of problems in our legal system that we need to address. One of them is anyone found playing politics in the legal system should immediately be removed from whatever office they hold. This is not a place for it. The legal system is supposed to be blind. It is supposed to be blind to color, religion, political affiliation. It is not supposed to be a weapon used against people you don't like. You shouldn't do that. Republicans shouldn't do that. Democrats shouldn't do that. No one should do that. And I don't know how to fix that except for get rid of these people. Anyone who wants to do this, get rid of them. Get them out of their job. Ostracize them from polite society. That's the only solution we have, because people like Alvin Bragg, as long as they receive kudos and he's going to use this to run for governor, and as long as that happens, I don't see a fix. I don't see a solution. as long as people celebrate. And it's just unfortunate because I think if people realized how dangerous this was, it would be different. But they just don't. And hopefully we can convince them. Hopefully we can convince them that it's a bad idea to use the government as a weapon against people you don't like. But it'll take some convincing, and it's up to every one of us to try and convince people of that on our own. Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the day. As always, I'm Tyler Chrestman. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I think I covered this in okay details, but if I missed a part or if there's things you're confused about, any questions you want to ask me, just leave them on the video, and I'll address them either at the end of the next video or in the comments below. As always, like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff for me. And I will catch you on the next episode.